Hello and welcome to part 2 of the 10 greatest progressive rock bands of all time ranked. So on the last video we did 10 to 6. At number 10 I had Marillion. At number 9 I had Dream Theater. At number 8 I had Frank Zappa. At number 7 I had Gentle Giant. At number 6 I had Rush. What we have here now is 5 absolutely hugely influential and massive selling bands. In some cases, some of the biggest selling bands of all time. These are heavyweight bands. You know, people think of progressive rock as being a sort of outlier, you know, weird genre over in the corner. But here, when we start to look at the greatest of them all, we're also talking about some of the biggest selling and greatest bands ever. So what have I got at number 5? Well, I have this band, and I have the album that introduced me to this band the very first time I heard them and made me love them, and that's Jethro Tull, a band that I have not discussed on this channel very much. So I'm now going to talk about Jethro Tull, and I realise holding this album up, it just looks like a white album. Shall we zoom in, see if you can see that? So it's the best of Jethro Tull. I went out and bought this album many years ago and fell in love with it. The tracks on here, the album that I thought was the one I was really interested in was actually Stand Up, and I went and then got Stand Up. It became one of my favourite albums. Aqualung, Thick as a Brick, Songs of the Wood, some of the greatest progressive rock albums of all time. I sort of then passed on to other bands. You know, I am a big Jethro Tull fan. I love one of the things I love about progressive rock is the integration of the English aesthetic. Okay, Jethro Tull are perhaps the greatest exponent. All these bands do, but this band is perhaps the greatest exponent, and I want to talk about that in context with Jethro Tull now and why I think they're so important. Jethro Tull start off as a blues band. They come out of the blues boom, which had happened in England in the 60s. This is what births, you know, through bands like Cream and Jimi Hendrix, and then Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, you know, Jeff Beck. This is really gives birth to rock music. And within there, there's this idea of progression, of progressiveness. Now, if you're going to progress rock music, you have a problem, because you then say to yourself, well, I come from England, I'm English, I'm British, and I'm singing about levees, and I'm singing about Route 66 and all this stuff, and it's not my culture. So how do I integrate my English culture into rock music? Many bands did this. In fact, I have a concept that all the great British bands, from the Beatles through Led Zeppelin, through to the Police, through the Sex Pistols, you know, even right up to artists like Stormzy, are brilliant in their integration of Englishness. Right? Now, perhaps the most bizarre band of all is Jethro Tull. Jethro Tull are an out-and-out rock band. And they start off as a blues rock band, a fiery blues rock band. But they bring in this English folk music and English vision. It's a vision of you. When you listen to Jethro Tull, you feel like you're going back in history. It's a very anti-rock music thing to do, but you feel like you're going back to almost like a medieval era of music. Gentle Giant was another band that were very good at doing this. But the thing with Jethro Tull is we're talking about a stadium band. We're talking about a band that would sell to 20,000 seater venues. So this is a band that would sell millions of records and get in the top 10. Out of music which is so rooted in medieval English music, in folk music, with the vision of that, the sort of imagery of that. And I think that's what makes them so appealing, rather than you know, this guy Ian Anderson stood on one leg, you know, with a bowler hat, or looking like a sort of almost like a court jester. You would think this would not be a commercial thing to do, but of course it's sold in bucket loads. I think all the early prog bands fall into progressive rock as a genre. They're all going towards it and innovating in their own way. I feel that Jethro Tull were quite surprised to find themselves within the progressive rock genre, and almost start to lampoon it. You know, Thick of a Brick, which is one of the great, you know, sort of conceptual sidelong prog albums of all time, is almost like lampooning progressive rock. And I think when prog can do that, it's at its greatest. It's the pomposity that brings these bands down later on when punk era comes out. So yeah, that's what I've got at number 5, is Jethro Tull. Now we move on to number 4. There's an argument that this band should be much, much higher. Why are they not that high? Well, I'll tell you why. Because I like this band, right? But I don't really like this band. I bought their albums as a youngster because they were in the prog genre. And I liked them, but I didn't really like them. It's not one of my favourite bands. I'm saying I don't like them, so don't go, how can you not like this band? I do like them. I can you know, put an album on by them and enjoy it. But a few years later, when I was trying to buy all my Fusion back here, and I was having to, you know, I started to take certain albums, you know, down to the record shop and sell them and part exchange them for Jazz Fusion albums, and this is one of the bands that suffered from that. I think I virtually got rid of all the albums by this band and replaced it much later with this, the best of. So that is Echoes, the best of Pink Floyd. Yes, Pink Floyd, one of the biggest bands of all time. Okay, so I do like them, right? I like bands that are fiery. I like bands that, you know, can really bang it out, and Floyd don't do that. They're much more measured, and then also we have lots of different eras of Pink Floyd, so we need to talk about that. The Syd Barrett era I still love. That is my favourite era of Pink Floyd. I think when Syd's in the band, they've got this avant-garde, almost like, you know, and they're ahead of their time, you know. It's like this sort of weird rock, electronic, improvisatory style, coupled with, you know, this bizarre guy that is so far out, but also has an incredible pop sensibility. And they do write pop songs, you know. I can remember getting in the car the other day with my kids, and Bike came on this album, and they loved it, you know. And Pink Floyd were able to do that. Then they go into a highly experimental period, which is very similar to Soft Machine. I feel that that stuff's very interesting. I feel that other musicians like Frank Zappa are able to do that better, but it's very interesting, and they're pushing the envelope. Then those ideas start to coalesce. The track Echoes, I think, is my favourite Pink Floyd track. When I was a kid, my favourite thing by Pink Floyd was my Live at Pompeii video, and I absolutely love that. There's something magical about that, and I think it's because they're on the cusp of that truly progressive avant-garde approach and then becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. Now, how do they do that? They do it with Dark Side of the Moon. How good is Dark Side of the Moon? It's absolutely incredible. It's mind-blowing. And they follow that up, you know, with Animals and Wish You Were Here, that are incredible albums. I start to lose interest when I got Wish You Were Here. It was a little bit middle of the road for me. And The Wall I never liked. I'm sure people are going to hate me for that. This is all about around the time that the Final Cut came out. And I remember my friend was a big Pink Floyd fan, and we bought Final Cut the day it came out and went and took it home and listened to it, and I just didn't like that at all, you know. But I do like Pink Floyd. Why are they at number 4? Because they are a true prog band. They're incredibly innovative. Some of the albums are some of the greatest albums of all time. The only reason I sold my Dark Side of the Moon is because I'd heard it so many times I never need to hear it again. But I could put that on now and be taken away. And so many people who have tried to get into prog rock, I've said, have you heard Dark Side of the Moon? That usually does it. It's such an incredible album. Pink Floyd, right. I am got to get a move on, or we won't get in through this. So what have I got at number 3? Genesis. Oh, I absolutely love Genesis, right? Incredible band. What can we say about them? Genesis, another band that are able, Pink Floyd do it as well, but like Jethro Tull, are able to really channel that English aestheticness and that sort of homemadeness into those early albums. It's quite incredible. They have a sound to me. Genesis have a sound which is quite magical. The actual sound itself they produce moves me very deeply. The first album that was produced by Jonathan King, Genesis to Revelation, it's not really a Genesis album, it's them attempting to be a pop album. Then on Trespass we see them forming something that's really interesting, their own take on progressive rock. When they come together with two new members, Phil Collins and Steve Hackett, they are just... This is my favourite Genesis album, actually, and I think it's because the ideas are fresh and they've just stumbled into something absolutely magical. And that feeling I get when I listen to Genesis is most concentrated on this. But then they follow it up with masterpiece after masterpiece. Foxtrot, Selling England by the Pound, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, again vying for my favourite album. And then when Gabriel leaves, Wind and Wuthering, all these albums are really incredible. I came to Genesis, as I've said many times on this channel, through the Three Sides live album. So I also got a dose of the more commercial Genesis, which I absolutely love. I really do think they're a great band. And they progress. This is one of the things you cannot moan about progressive rock band for progressing. When punk came along, they were one of the bands that were able to take on punk and listen to it and go, right, we can see what their criticism of us. Let's draw everything in. But when they draw everything in, they still retain their Genesis-ness, right? People who don't like the new Genesis, they're not musicians. You listen to what they're doing. They're still doing the same things that they used to do on the early albums. It's just pulled in, all right? Songs like Abacab and Duke and Turn It On Again, they're in terms of the chord voicings and the timings, it's still all there. Yesterday, Invisible Touch came on, and I've got to be honest. At that point, I've lost interest in Genesis. But I listened to it, and I thought the reason why this is so big is because it's a brilliant piece of pop songwriting. This is something that Genesis have in buckets. Phil Collins is an incredible songwriter, but when you put him with Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks, there's something that magic happens. And so don't begrudge them the fact that in the 80s they became also brilliant pop songwriters. Don't throw that out. They just progressed onto something else. So that's what we have at number 3, Genesis, an incredible band. So who do we have at number 2? Right, well, I'm going to hold up which is possibly the greatest progressive rock band album ever made now. There it is, Close to the Edge. Yes, for me, are the progressive rock band. When someone says prog, I think yes. Right, I absolutely love Yes. I've said this a million times on this channel that, I was into metal and heavy rock, and someone gave me a copy of the Yes album, and that changed me for life. It made my ears open up and realise that there was other music out there. I'm so indebted to this band. I absolutely love them. To me, they're a band of absolute individuals. Steve Howe has one of the most individual guitar sounds. Bill Bruford and the late great Alan White, incredibly individualistic drum sounds. Chris Squire, one of the greatest bass players with one of the most signature bass sounds. Rick Wakeman, these are, and John Anderson. On top of it all, John Anderson's incredible squeaky little voice and his vision of music, which is quite incredible, which is ethereal and spiritual and everything that's anti-rock and roll, and yet he's able to amass this band around him. Absolutely incredible. What can I say about this band? Why are they number 1? I tell you why. Because it's the innovation, right? They take some time to get going, as do Jethro Tull, as do many of these prog rock bands. They don't really hit their prog stride till 70, 71. There's other people who have innovated their way. I think it's the Yes album, 71, where you start to hear them as being a prog band. But even that album hasn't got all the things in place. It's not till we get to Relaya that we really hear, them as a full-on prog band. And many other bands have done stuff before, like ELP. And as I'm talking here, we get to this point, I realise that ELP are not on this list, which is a mistake, isn't it? I should have had them on the list. Oh my God. What do I do? I've done 2 videos here, and I tell you why ELP aren't on this list? Because I really don't like ELP. How important are they to this genre? So what I'm going to do, and I'm right to do this, okay, and I'm going to keep all this in, I don't care. is that at joint second place, I'm going to have ELP and Yes. Because that's where ELP should be. And why? Because they do, they innovate right from day one. They have that sound. They've got it early on. And I think Keith Emerson and with The Nice and Greg Lake with King Crimson, they've been there before. It gives them those extra points that put them on that thing. I was a big fan of Trilogy by ELP, and I was a big fan of the first album. Brain Salad Surgery is okay, but it's got things I'm not so keen on that album. And then the other albums, I'm a bit. So Tarkus is the side one is incredible. Side two. So I was never a huge fan of ELP, but as I'm talking and I've really thought this list through, I cannot believe I've missed ELP off my list. And they should be there, so I've just added them in at number 2. Oh my God, is this right? Shall I do this? You'll start again. You've got to see it. Well, you're seeing it. My thought process is happening in real time. So all you ELP fans that are upset, I may have put them in a lot lower if I'd have thought this through. How do you forget ELP? How do you forget ELP? They're almost like, if you've got encyclopedia of progressive rock, ELP are going to go on the front. What is it with me and ELP? This is a video I've got to do at some point. What is it with me and ELP? Right, so so I'm going to count down before we go to number 1. So at number 10 I have Marillion, number 9 Dream Theater, number 8 Frank Zappa, number 7 Gentle Giant, number 6 Rush, number 5 Jethro Tull, number 4 Pink Floyd, number 3 Genesis, and then at joint number 2 ELP and Yes. I think that's about right. Are ELP greater than Genesis in terms of greatness? I think they are. I think in terms of prog bands, these are the ones that we've got to have in there. Floyd, Genesis, ELP, Yes. I maybe I should have done top 11. Look, you decide. You'd say, well, I've done the right thing, or not. I don't know. Okay. I sat there for hours yesterday trying to work this list out, and I missed out ELP. Who's at number 1 then? Should we just get on with it? Who's at number 1? It's King Crimson. That's it. They invented the genre. They are possibly my favourite prog band. They're consistent all the way through their history. Absolutely brilliant. And most importantly, they've been prog from day one. They were prog on the first album and they were prog on the last tour when they just called it a day. Right? What's the most important progressive rock band of the 1960s? It's King Crimson, because they invent the genre. Who's the most important progressive rock band of the 70s? It's arguable. ELP, Pink Floyd, Yes, Tull. They're all very important bands. But I would say the thing that gives King Crimson the edge is because in 1972, after really defining what prog is, Robert Fripp changes the game. Those like Stunts in Aspic, Stars of the Bible, Black and Red, that's a different sound. Absolutely different sound. He's changed the sound. If I hadn't have heard those albums, I don't know whether I would have been able to then go towards the Mavish Nuxtra and a whole host of other bands, industrial metal, new wave, avant-garde, rock improvisation, bands like Henry Cow, all that sort of stuff for me is encapsulated in that sound created by King Crimson. What's the greatest progressive rock band of the 1980s? It's this, and this is perhaps the greatest progressive rock album of the 1980s. This band with Tony Levin is as important as a 70s band. In the 90s, when they come back, with the Thrack band, and all the stuff they've done through there, they're still cutting edge, they're still pushing the envelope. This is the most important, innovative band in progressive rock history. Without doubt, they're the top of the tree. Right? Did they sell as many albums as Pink Floyd? And yes, no, they didn't, but they still sold a ton of albums. They were successful. They were influential. Everything that I said at the beginning of this video that counts, so why you make this list, they do it. That's King Crimson, an absolutely credible band that we have at number 1. So I hope you like this video. And I hope you enjoyed my mistake of not putting ELP on the list and forgetting all about them. you know, and I think that says something about personal taste. These, however objective you try and get, and maybe I should have just gone for my 10 favourite prog bands of all time. Maybe that's what I just should have done, and put your gongs on there, and put your soft machines on there, and put all of those things on there that should have gone on, and all the stuff that I think's prog. That you know, like the Streets and Kendrick Lamar, maybe they should have been all on, and you'd have all been upset, you know, and there maybe been one Genesis album cropping up somewhere else. But when you try and do this, sometimes subconsciously your mind can blot out a band. And in my case, you know, I begrudgingly put Marillion on, I begrudgingly put Dream Theater on, I begrudgingly put Pink Floyd on, but absolutely managed to completely take out one of the biggest prog bands of all time, ELP. Do I hate ELP? No, I like ELP. There's stuff that they do I really, really like. They're just not a favourite band of mine. I got into ELP about 3 weeks before I got into the Mavish Nuxtra. I thought they were fantastic. Then I got a Mavish Nuxtra album. For me, forever, ELP have always in my mind been compared to the Mavish Nuxtra, and I can remember it was the best of ELP with the sort of samurai women or whatever it is, the Japanese women on the front, you know, that album. That was the first ELP album I ever got a best of to find out about them. And I can remember putting that album on and listening to it and trying to like it, but being aware that the Mavish Nuxtra just changed my world. All right, that is what prog led me to, is the Mavish Nuxtra, and then Mavish Nuxtra changed my world, and that's why we have this channel. Right, so I've finished there, I'm done. I'll see you on the next video. I hope you like this utter mess that I've just managed to traverse my way through. And I bet there's some other huge progressive rock band. And if anybody mentions Van der Graaf Generator, I just don't know what I'll do.